Tommyinnit is the single most important character on the Dream SMP. His actions have either directly or indirectly led to most of the major wars and events on the SMP itself. But Tommyinnit is also a deeply flawed character. Unlike many of the other quote-unquote good guys on the server, Tommyinnit doesn't act like a nice person. He is incredibly selfish, egocentric, and rarely seems to care much about anyone else apart from himself, which is basically this pure selfishness. And yet, he is never depicted as the villain. He is never the bad guy. He's always the one being oppressed. He's always the underdog. I'm not saying that Tommy is secretly an evil mastermind, but we're gonna look today, in this video essay, in this character analysis, about how Tommyinnit has changed as his character arc has developed him from an incredibly arrogant and self-centered person into still arrogant and self-centered. But now he has the extra bonus of being incredibly traumatized, and as well look at both the positive and negative sides of him, and potentially how he'll change in the future. This is my character analysis of Tommyinnit. Before I go on with the video, thank you all for 1,000 subs. Big thank you from me. I am very, very happy about it. But as a quick reminder, if you could all smash like, subscribe, and come check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/hatlemma, I would be very thankful. Tommyinnit, in the pre-L'Manberg stages of the server, was very much Tommy. Without responsibility or any of the trauma he has now, he was very much his core personality as a person. He was selfish, he was egoistical, he only ever seemed to care about the discs and himself, and would easily disregard both his life and the life of the only people who stood behind him, Tubbo and Sapnap, for these discs. He really didn't seem to care much about anything else. And yet, whenever he had the opportunity to trade something like his chestplate for the discs, he would still try and scam. He would still try and maneuver his way out, find some way that he wouldn't have to give anything up. He was incredibly selfish in this way. He didn't want to give anything up no matter what. It's only when it really came down to the wire, when there was no other option, that he finally gave away his chestplate for the discs. He tried nearly everything from portal trapping to straight up scamming to trying to steal items to blackmail Dream, but none of it ever worked, and in the end he just had to resort to probably what was the most despicable thing for him, a fair trade. Tommy at this time was very much free to do what he wanted. There was no such thing as any sort of government body at the time. The server wasn't even properly developed. So Tommy ran rampant without any control. Then, of course, came L'Manberg and Wilbur, the thing and the person who would have the biggest impact on our fledgling little gremlin boy, somehow managing to domesticate and integrate him quite successfully into his government. Then the Great L'Manberg War passed, and Tommy commits the one major act of sacrifice he's ever committed on the SMP. The one thing that will have defined his time with L'Manberg. The sacrifice of 2 canon lives and his discs. 1 canon life, of course, in the bunker, the other in the bow duel with Dream, but his discs was the one that really mattered. He voluntarily gave up his discs for L'Manberg. He made that active choice, and it didn't have the consequences he expected. Tommy craves respect. He craves that everyone else to admire him. But that's not what came with being the vice president of L'Manberg. What came was responsibility for a nation that was already starting to fail. What came was nothing but a sense of being there. Nothing had changed for him. And so the first thing he thought to do was to try and scam his way into power. While it wasn't a direct scam, it was basically that. It was a one-party election. Of course, Quackity came and ruined it, but he was perfectly fine to go ahead with it, and even throughout the election process was still bribing people like Carl in the judge cases, trying to team up with Quackity after after they brought in Jayshla, and he didn't work. Nothing was working, and in the end, Tommy lost. He hasn't really lost before. Sure, they quote unquote lost the Great L'Manberg War, but they still managed to win in the end. But here, no. They just lost completely. But Tommy's heart didn't lose. What I mean by this is, while Wilbur's heart lost the battle, when Wilbur lost L'Manberg, he lost most of his sanity and slowly started going insane. But Tommy, that's not what happened to Tommy. When Tommy lost to L'Manberg, it wasn't an act of, they were better than us. To Tommy, it was an act of, oh, they cheated, and oh, they're so despicable, he's such a despicable dictator. And that's the image he created of Jayshla. Tommy was still the plucky young underdog hero who was going to come back and save L'Manberg from its threatening president. In the words of Tommyinnit's always right. Of course, this leads to the entirety of the Pogtopian Revolution, with Tommy bringing in Techno, who would be one of his greatest enemies, quote unquote, for a lot of the server, but also doing quite a few different things. One of them is, of course, allying and then sort of going against Dream. He allies with Dream for a moment, something that would never happen nowadays. The first major thing to come out of this was when Tubbo was killed at the L'Manberg Festival. This was when Tommy realized that both Wilbur was going slowly downward and that Techno wasn't exactly a really good person. He had started to realize that maybe the only person who was truly responsible on this group was him. Wilbur was going completely nuts, Techno just wanted anarchy, and Tubbo and Nikki had just joined. Of course, this all culminated in probably one of the things that had one of the greatest traumas on Tommy, the Manberg War. The war itself went pretty well. The aftermath, though, hit Tommy hard. One of the biggest things that came out of it was the fact that Tommyinnit, for the first time in SMP history, had given up power and authority in a responsible way. Tommy had the choice to become the president of the L'Manberg, but he realized, through some form of responsibility, probably brought into him by Wilbur, maybe being in charge of Pogtopia, but he actually decided that maybe it was better for someone like Tubbo to leave the country because he wouldn't be able to. Of course, this didn't change anything till the aftermath. Techno still betrayed them, and Wilbur did too. Wilbur, the first person Tommy had found as a mentor figure, maybe even a father figure, had just betrayed him, had just fallen into the madness, into the insanity that had slowly been plaguing him, and was now gone from Tommy's life. This was the first of many traumatic events to follow, and is spiking up even worse now that he's met Wilbur in the afterlife, and Wilbur isn't the good man he used to be. Of course, after Wilbur's betrayal came the continuation of Techno's betrayal, as L'Manberg, scarred with TNT, was now scarred further with Withers. Tommy, left broken and hateful and spiteful, aimed all of his anger at the people who had helped Jayshla, the Dream SMP, more specifically its king. The exile arc is probably the most painful arc for Tommy, maybe just compared with the recent prison arc. It all begins, of course, with Tommy's anger being completely sucker punched into George Knopfound's house. Destroying that place, absolutely tearing it apart, making it just absolute crap. Tommy thought, of course, there would be no repercussions. His mind, slightly frazzled, had kind of abandoned the responsibility he seemed to have gained, and, well, he would learn that this time his actions do indeed have consequences. But Dream, in this specific case, was smart. He realized that threatening Tommy would do nothing. Tommy would always have the backup of his friends and would always be able to rely on them and be happy and persevere through the power of friendship. So Dream decided to cut the power of friendship at its core, and told Tommy, straightforwardly, and told L'Manberg, that if they didn't exile Tommy, that well, harrowing things would happen to L'Manberg. L'Manberg would be literally contained and trapped from the outside world. A lot of people hate Tubbo, for the decision he made then, but if you look at it, it's one of the most responsible decisions Tubbo's ever made. He was forced to choose between either A, locking up his nation, a nation he had just been given the authority over, and locking up his own citizens, or sending away his best friend. And he took the presidential route. Of course, now that we see what happened, it may have been a better idea to stay with Tommy, but hindsight is 20/20 after all. Thus began a painful and harrowing experience for Tommy. He was humiliated, he was beaten down, but most of all, he was separated, contained, and alone. Dream absolutely tortured Tommy for this time. Even though it wasn't actual torture like beating him up, he forced him to burn all his stuff, any hard work, any actual work that Tommy could ever do, completely gone. He was completely isolated from anyone else. He was made to believe that everyone else had betrayed him and no longer cared about him. And that Dream, the man who was literally hurting him, was his only friend. This is just class A manipulation. You cut them off from everyone else, you make them believe that you're their only friend so that they just trust you and will do what you want. But somehow Tommy snaps out of it. He realizes, probably just through his innate knowledge or just the fact that he's been around Dream for this long, that Dream isn't his friend. Dream's just been manipulating him and shitting on him and just making him miserable for all this time. He wasn't having any more of it. So he packed his stuff and left. This doesn't mean that all the effects of this time never got to Tommy. This had incredible psychological and huge amounts of trauma inflicted on him. Things that are coming back now after he's forced to interact with Dream again. Slowly the trauma's building up, and slowly it's changing Tommy. Tommy, of course, ends up in the luxurious home of Technoblade, and Techno really should have just killed him on sight, decides that this small, broken man is no longer the quote-unquote tyrannical hero that he used to be, and decides to say, you know what, our goals seem to align for the moment, let's help each other out. And for the first time in ever, really, since the Manberg War, Techno and Tommy team up. A team up which, while it lasts short, it quickly gets broken apart in a devastating way, especially for Techno. While Techno and Tommy slowly bond over recovering lost weapons, getting bedrock from Drista, and just having fun in L'Manberg, now the fact that, well, he's with Techno and no one can hurt him, Techno decides to finally open up to Tommy, which is something a lot more on Techno's side, but Tommy accepts this friendship and even accepts the acts of peace, well, keeps it. But then decides to do something weird. When Techno admits to Tommy that he's going to destroy L'Manberg, something in Tommy's memories are stirred. Maybe he starts to remember the times he's had with Tubbo and the time Techno killed Tubbo, he definitely does, but he's maybe starting to rethink what he's doing with Techno. He remembers what Techno did to L'Manberg and is starting to remember the good times he had there. And of course, this comes to an end in the festival, the second festival, which just never really happens. It's more just an active debate. While Tommy and Tubbo in this event scream at each other and get furious with each other, and Tommy even utters the lines, "The discs were worth more to me than you ever were." In the end, Tubbo gives his disc to Dream, and Tommy fully betrays Techno. This isn't a betrayal like the betrayal Techno did to Tommy at the very beginning, or the betrayal even Wilbur did. This is an active breach of a friendship. This is a very personal betrayal to Techno. And it's the first time Tommy has really gone out of ways to do something incredibly bad. This is just a heartbreaking moment for a lot of Techno fans and for Techno himself, but Tommy doesn't seem fazed by it at all, which may be part of the problem. He's just completely fine with doing this. It's a bit weird, and it's really heartbreaking for Techno especially, but for Tommy, this event is the precursor to an absolutely apocalyptic event. With Dream and Techno now teamed up, there's very little chance that L'Manberg has to defend, but Tommy still feels the need that in this situation, him as the hero, as the protagonist, has to step up. but not everyone sees him as good anymore. As I've kind of shown throughout the tone of this video, Tommy isn't the best person morally and as a person. He's shit on Jack Manifold, who started to see him as a villain, and Nihichu has been broken so hard that she also sees him as a villain, and they both go off to decide, hey, maybe we should start attacking Tommy. Rambo is looking at the potential problems of another massive war on the server, and even Tubbo is slightly scared of this. Of course, none of this ever matters as they prepared one last defensive before L'Manberg falls to ruins. In the destruction, Tommy tries to reason with Techno for one more time. This reasoning is a lot less about trying to convince the other person, but it's a lot more about Tommy trying to convince himself that he was in the right for betraying Techno. He's constantly saying that Techno's the one who betrayed him. Like, Tommy never did anything because this is how Tommy operates. His psyche is fragile after exile and after especially this betrayal and now seeing the destruction of his home all around him. Tommy is desperately trying to keep himself as the good guy here. He's trying to keep himself stable as his brain is slowly cracking under the pressure that he's been put under at an incredibly young age, considering that Tommy and Tubbo are both canonically incredibly young on the server. He's just desperately trying to convince himself that no, he's in the right. Techno's the one in the wrong here. I never did anything bad to Techno. Techno's the one who betrayed me first. In the end, none of it matters as L'Manberg falls to pieces and the current arc begins. This arc is not over, and after this video is released, there may be some streams that have been made or things that I've not been able to cover. I'm sorry, but that's the constraints of writing a script in advance. This arc begins with Tommy and Tubbo facing off Dream one final time, and then winning. Of course, they don't win the actual fight, but they win through the fact that Dream goes completely insane, and everyone else on the server comes to save Tommy and Tubbo. He loses 2 canon lives and is locked away. The importance of this moment to Tommy is huge. He regains both of his discs, he locks away his main aggressor and the person who's caused most of his pain on the server for like the entire time he's been on it, and is finally free from a lot of the shackles he was put under. For most of the server, ever since the beginning of L'Manberg, Tommy's been in some kind of conflict, whether that be a democratic one like the election, wars, or just a conflict with Dream. But now that he has his discs back, and that he also has Dream locked away where he can't hurt him anymore, Tommy is free to do what he wants, and he sure does that. He relaxes with Tubbo, he goes and visits nuclear bomb tests, even though Jack Manifold and Nihichu are still trying to kill him. They don't get anything done and he never realized it, so he's still fine mentally. He also starts building his hotel and showing signs of healing. He's changing as a person as well, acting nicer and not as angry towards the world, not as egoistical. Then comes the visit to Dream in prison. The thing that would crack and break Tommy's psyche again. The visit was meant to just be the final time Tommy has to ever see Dream, a kind of moment of closure to finally finish up this absolute agony that Dream has put him through. Instead, it becomes a reminder of the trauma he had to go through. He's locked away in this small room with the one person he hates the most, with the one person who's tortured him the most on the server. He also dies. This is a huge thing for Tommy. This is an absolutely mind-boggling thing. He is the only person on the server, apart from maybe Jack Manifold, to have to go through this. He sees Wilbur, he sees his old mentor, his old friend, twisted and dark and in a much worse place than he was when he was on the server, and Tommy is just broken beyond belief. Even when he's out of the prison, he's going into a world that thought he was dead and that's mourned him and that's past him. His best friend, while not hasn't moved on, has found a husband, and Tommy is no longer Tubbo's main concern. Jack Manifold took over his hotel, but Tommy is completely broken. He's paranoid about Dream, paranoid about Techno freeing Dream because he never wants to go through death. He never wants to go through death and be brought back. He doesn't want Wilbur back and Wilbur to cause chaos again. He's constantly paranoid about everything going on and just wants to go back to how things were before the prison visit. Tommyinnit is probably the person closest to being the true protagonist of the Dream SMP. Well, one of the really big selling points of the SMP is the fact that you can follow a huge variety of characters and make any one of them your personal protagonist. As the story of the SMP, Tommy has been in the middle, or the main character, of enough of these stories that he is probably the person who has the closest grasp to that claim. Of course, this doesn't mean that he's been able to go through his journey completely happy. Tommy is a child protagonist who came into this world of chaos and fighting, ready to take it on, believing that he himself alone could take on whatever forces would ever come after him. How wrong he was. His brash nature pushed him into so many conflicts he couldn't deal with, and which always ended up costing him something. The Lamberg War costed him the discs and 2 canon lives. The election costed him the life of his mentor. The exile costed him, well, a lot of his mental stability, and in the end lost him Lamberg forever. And going to prison to try and clean up a mess, or just try and finally have closure, lost him another canon life, and even more of his mental stability, driving him further and further into insanity. His journey has gone from just this brash, confident kid who was pretty selfish and egoistical, but was still just a kid. But through the traumas and experiences he's had to go through, has molded him to someone who is now just an angry man. He's had times of peace where he's been able to relax and be himself and not have to be angry at the world. But now, after all he's been through with Dream, he can't be happy. He can't be happy knowing that the man who tortured him is still alive and could still come after him. He's constantly terrified and paranoid and needs to get rid of Dream to be able to be at peace with both the world and himself. Another way to look at how Tommy's personality and, well, anger has affected him has been by looking at the people who are his friends. His only true friend for most of the SMP has been Tubbo, with him driving away nearly everyone else, or everyone else just going away, or not ever being with him in the first place. People like Nikki and Jack Manifold, who could have genuinely tried to be his friend, were driven away from him by the fact that he brought conflict onto himself, and by doing so, he brought conflict onto the rest of the people around him, normally Lamberg. Jack Manifold is a much more personal thing, with Tommy treating this guy who just genuinely wanted to be friends with him like complete trash over and over and over again. People like Techno, who Tommy had a very real chance to be friends with, were completely crushed just because Tommy needed to go back to his old friends and gave Techno no help, completely threw him away. But Tommy's ended up alone. Even Tubbo, his best friend, who mourned his death, has now moved on a bit. Tommy isn't the most important person in his life anymore. Maybe he's a bit, but he now also has Rambo and Michael. So Tommy's becoming more and more alone. And he needs to kill Dream to get rid of whatever's haunting him. In the future, there's 2 options. Either A, Tommy kills Dream and goes even more insane after realizing that killing Dream hasn't brought him the satisfaction he needed and he's still tormented. That, or the probably more likely one, is that he fails to kill Dream, Dream escapes, and revives maybe J-Schlatt and Wilbur, and there's now another massive war with Tommy completely cracking down because all of this would have been his fault, and this time he was just trying to help, but it just ruined everything. Tommyinnit is a child who was full of himself and wanted to take on everything. He wanted to be the big man. He wanted to grow up. But the world he was in wasn't a nice one and wasn't forgiving and completely broke him down. All he needs now is some peace. But considering Jack Manifold still wants to kill him, Dream still has a very real chance to escape, and everyone else on the server just doesn't seem to care as much about Tommy anymore. It feels like he's becoming more and more alone, and that something bad will soon happen to him. Thank you for watching this video. This video took a bit longer because of Tommy dying and then coming back to life, and I had to change the script quite a few times, but in the end, it came out well. Thank you all for watching. If you want to find me, come watch me on Twitch. I'm going to be starting some pretty cool stuff on there. Also, come to my Discord and just relax and chill so you can get notified when a new video or a new stream starts. Anyways, all that said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you stick around for the next one. Subscribe, comment, and like!